Good afternoon. So I was going to give you a complete introduction, but I see we have two people in the audience who were here yesterday or there yesterday. Still, I do want to say a few things. So Tiffany, I'm going to say something that will feel a little bit like a repeat from yesterday for the other people in the audience. But originally, this invitation was planned for April 2020. And so Boris Tavernier and Alexis Jenni were to come and to discuss about and present a book and their work around Femmes d'ici, cuisines d'ailleurs. But as you know, because of the pandemic, it was cancelled, it was postponed to last year, it was postponed then rescheduled, and finally got here this year. And so what this meant was that we were still going to talk about Femmes d'ici, cuisines d'ailleurs, but we were also going to include other collaborative projects that they have been working on together since then. And so in 2021, in fact, they published together Reste d'enfance. And Reste d'enfance is about, includes about 40 or over 40 contributions from food journalists, writers, French writers, Francophone writers, Japanese writer who's also who writes also or is translated in French. I forget about Ryoko, and it was about the encounter between childhood, memory, and filiation around or transmission around a dish, remembering something during childhood. Not the Proust Madeleine, of course, but something that may go all the way back to childhood and that felt special. And so that was the second work together. The third one just came out last year, Ensemble pour mieux se nourrir. And Ensemble pour mieux se nourrir is about, really, and something we'll be addressing today, is about, it's a tour really of food activism in France. And it highlights the growing food solidarity movement and other initiatives for overcoming insecurity, food insecurity in France. But it is also about looking at places and moments of poverty and precariousness. It is also going back to Femmes d'ici, cuisines d'ailleurs, rethinking the urban space and especially the suburbs, and how people have a certain stereotypical representation sometimes of the suburbs, and where they would not, if you're talking about gastronomy and culinary competitions, you would not think of suburbs, modest working class suburbs from the Lyon metropolis as places where you would necessarily have these take place. So it is also kind of subverting some of the biases or even notions about what French patrimony means when it comes to food and cooking. So we're going to look at a little bit about this in this panel, and then we have a final panel at 2 o'clock, which is just a conversation with Alexis Jenni, and where we'll really move back to his writing. But in all this text, in Femmes d'ici, cuisines d'ailleurs, he's the backbone, where he's the one who told the story and the stories of these 15 women who participated and are part of the book. So it is a book about cooking, but it is first and foremost a book about also some experience and a journey for these women who left their country behind because of exile, because of their parents leaving, because of migration or other reasons. Some of their experiences, some at times being really harsh. And we'll see how through these stories you both address that, but you also come to address issues of insecurity, of precariousness, and what it means also when it comes to food. So we are very pleased to have you both. I'd like to come back to what I was just saying, to Reste d'enfance and Femmes d'ici, cuisines d'ailleurs. And the way it highlights the place of food as part of memory and of a journey, including when it means some harsh experiences, as is the case for most of the 15 women who are part of this experience. Bonjour, bonjour, entrez. So I just introduced our two speakers. I'll continue, move on to our discussion, and we'll have a chance to introduce them again at two. Donc, je voulais revenir un petit peu à la question justement de ces expériences, de ce qui a été un moment difficile pour ces femmes, et the encounter really between the emotional, the apprenticeship of a number of gestures and tastes around the kitchen, around cooking, eating, the family, and a moment. Donc peut-être si l'un et l'autre, vous pouvez parler un petit peu de votre expérience en tant que contribution à Reste d'enfance, et pour revenir à Femmes d'ici, cuisines d'ailleurs, peut-être Alexis, ce que ça voulait dire d'écrire ces histoires dans le sens où ça reste une médiation. Donc, comment arriver à s'effacer et à être une voix la plus proche de ces femmes qui retracent leur expérience, tout en étant insider, outsider, en étant à l'intérieur ou à l'extérieur.
Bien, oui, c'était une expérience qui est passionnante en tant qu'écrivain. C'est-à-dire qu'avant de faire ça, moi j'ai fait des romans. Voilà. Et là, bon, c'était une expérience particulière parce que c'était essayer de raconter ce que des gens disaient. Et ça s'est passé d'une façon très simple. Il n'y a pas eu d'interview, il n'y a pas eu de questionnement. Je ne me suis pas assis devant la personne en lui demandant « raconte-moi ta vie ». Nous étions 6. Il faut que je m'interrompe de temps en temps pour traduire. Donc nous étions 6 co-auteurs du livre. Moi j'étais chargé de l'écrit. Et les autres, du dessin, de la photo, de la recette, etc. Donc j'étais en charge de l'écrit.
So this experience was a really particular experience and a very unique one compared to the writing that he was doing before, where he was writing novels. This writing project was really focused on writing things that people have said. And it wasn't necessarily writing an interview where, you would sit down in front of the subject and ask them questions and ask them about their lives, but it was more writing the experience of having this group of 6. So Alexis was in charge of the writing, but there was also, a chef, an illustrator, a graphic designer, this whole team of 6 people working on this book.
Alors, je n'ai pas enregistré, parce que nous sommes restés plusieurs heures. Puis ça aurait été, un appareil d'enregistrement aurait été une faute de goût. J'avais simplement un petit carnet, celui que j'ai habituellement pour travailler pour moi, tout petit, grand comme ça, et un stylo, puis c'est tout. C'était discret. Et nous avons fait comme on fait quand on est en famille, où il y a une préparation de repas de famille. Nous avons un peu aidé, alors pas beaucoup parce que nous sommes maladroits, mais voilà. Et du coup, il y avait de l'agitation dans la cuisine et nous participions à l'agitation.
So, All right. So Alexis did not record these interviews because they stayed, for many hours, and it just wouldn't have been possible to record. So instead, he had his little notebook that he's used to working with. Was taking notes in the notebook. It was much more discreet that way. And the way that it ended up happening was really more like a family meal than it was an interview where, they helped a little bit, but not a lot because they're clumsy. But, you had people working in the kitchen, them helping a little bit, and it really, took the shape of a family meal.
Et donc je participais à la conversation et je notais rapidement des petites phrases, des petites expressions, des petites choses, voilà. Et ensuite, chez moi, j'ai essayé de raconter quelque chose qui était à la fois l'histoire d'une femme et à la fois l'histoire de la rencontre et à laquelle j'avais participé. Et du coup, ça faisait un récit où j'étais un peu partie prenante, non pas dans la vie de la femme, mais dans le récit qu'elle faisait. Voilà. Et ça donnait quelque chose qui était à la fois proche et à la fois, c'est à la fois le récit du passé et l'expérience du présent, et donc ça donnait une distance particulière que j'ai essayé de garder, c'est-à-dire il n'y avait pas la froideur de la distance, il n'y avait pas non plus trop de proximité, j'ai essayé de garder une bonne distance, une juste distance, et également en interrogeant l'humanité de la personne, c'est-à-dire, c'est ce que je fais dans mes romans, c'est-à-dire, j'essaye de comprendre l'effet que ça fait d'être à cette place. Donc c'est pas un récit extérieur. Excusez-moi.
So Alexis would, record things in his notebook, like little turns of phrase, little quotes, and then go back home and try to figure out a way to tell this that was both the story of this woman, but also the story of this encounter. And in that way, he's present in this writing. There's not this sort of coldness of distance between him and the subject. It's really a story about, this encounter and about, not just about the women themselves. And so, that's also something that he tries to do in his novels, which is, recount this, sort of the distance of the past and also the present. And, yeah.
Et c'est vrai que ce n'est pas un spectacle que j'essaie de montrer avec cette distance, en disant, voilà, il est arrivé ci, il est arrivé ça. Non, c'est essayer d'écouter et puis l'effet que ça me fait à moi, ce que ça bouge chez moi, ce récit. Voilà. Et donc, en essayant de ne pas être misérabiliste, c'est-à-dire de ne pas faire, parce qu'elles nous ont raconté des malheurs, ces femmes, de ne pas mettre en scène ces malheurs, mais de saisir l'effet que ça fait humainement d'entendre ça.
So, there were really kind of horrible things that were, spoken about in these interviews, and they weren't trying to sort of set up this sad story. They were really trying to focus on the human aspect and the effect that has on, the people, on the listeners, and, the way that it makes you feel as the writer and as the listener.
Du coup, c'est comme